Good afternoon, everyone. Let's start our usual Sunday Leads meeting. And today is 28th April 2024. And we have a very timely topic for discussion, reforms for a robust framework for effective governance. This comes from Anura de Silva. And Anura is a citizen activist and a change agent advocating for social, political, and economic transformation as the only means to build a collaborative nation we all deserve. So, as usual, before we start, I have a couple of announcements to make, which I will do, and then I will show a couple of publications that that Anura has done, and the platform is Anura's thereafter. So, Leads project, I mean, we are walking the talk. We are the education charity in Sri Lanka. So we do have to commit ourselves to do educational things whilst we are doing these discussions as well. So this one is one of the Leads projects which is taking place. Just listen to the initial trail video on this one.
සුභාවිත ගීතය ගීත විචාරය සමග මානව සංගතිය නිර්මාණය කරන්නට දායක වන වත්මන් ශිෂ්‍ය ප්‍රජාවගේ දැනුම් පද්ධතිය සෞන්දර්යයෙන් සන්නද්ධ කරන්නට අපි සූදානම්.
2024 අප්‍රේල් මස 29 වන දින උස්සාපිටිය රිරිසඳ ජාතික පාසල් පරිශ්‍රයට
දැයි දරුවන් වෙනුවෙන්ම ඉස්කෝලෙට හුස්ම අරගෙන තියෙනවා.
වැඩසටහන මෙහෙවීම ප්‍රවීණ ජ්‍යෙෂ්ඨ සම්මානනීය මාධ්‍යවේදී මහේෂ් නිසංකයන්. ගීත විචාරය විදුහල්පතිනි සඳමාලි තෙන්නකෝන්.
ඔබේ සමන්පත් විඳවන සුමීරි ගායනය ප්‍රවීණ සම්මානනීය ගායන ශිල්පිනී විනෝදා අහංගම සහ ගායන ශිල්පී පාඨශාලාචාර්ය විශාරද තරංග සම්පත්. වැඩසටහන සඳහා පූර්ණ අනුග්‍රහකත්වය ගෝලීය ලීඩ් සංවිධානය. වැඩසටහන අධ්‍යක්ෂණය සහ සම්බන්ධීකරණය චාන්ද්‍ර කරුණාතිලක.
අපේම පාසල අපේම මවවිය එදවස් අපහට නැත ආයේ වෙනසක අරුමේ.
All right, thank you all. We will have this Leads program. This is a model program, and then it will be done regularly based on the kind of funding that people want to offer to have such programs. But the whole video of the program will be available after 29th, which I will share or show when it's happening. So the next item is about next week. So the next item is next week's Leads meeting on 5th May 2024. But this meeting, as we suggested, and also was a slot that is made available for any political platforms. And so we will not have a meeting on the 5th May at 6 p.m. for on Leads principles, but instead, it's been offered to a political platform, which is Systemic Change Peramuna. And then the opening ceremony will take place on 5th May. And I expect that we will have some invitations from that. And apparently, they will have only maximum of 100 participants on this. So I will keep you informed on that for all Leads participants to be able to at least listen to this in the future. So let's come back to our today's speaker is Anura de Silva. He's actually written very reasonable articles that is very timely in the recent times. So first one he's written saying 75 years of non-democracy in our democratic nation, which is a very good title, and it summarizes the whole scenario that we are in. And the second one is he's written is vote to establish democracy instead of the same political cults at the next election. So you can again see what he is coming at. So the platform is now Anura, and then after that we'll have a short Q&A before we conclude. Thank you very much. Anura, welcome. So I think I have made you a shared person. So, Anura?
Yes, thanks, Chula.
Yeah, thank you.
And as we have all come together from different time zones, I'm not sure how to even greet everyone. So I'm going to say good day to everyone. You know, my time is 5:30 a.m. in the morning.
There are lots of people very early in the morning, I think, from the other end of the world as well. So.
Okay. So good day to everyone. And let me first of all thank Chula for organizing leads and carrying the brunt of the weight, and for everyone else for weekly participating on Sundays and sharing your thoughts and ideas. So we can all kind of learn through each other and put our heads together to hopefully derive at some common understanding of a nation that we all deserve. Like many of you, I'm also a citizen and activist, a reformist, and some even call me a transformist, because I really don't have any quick fixes. After 70 plus years of decay, I think it's going to take a long time, but at some, hopefully at some election time, or at some junction, we will need to start making a turnaround so that we can take a new path. So let me declare at the outset that I have no solutions for or a magic wand to make everything grand soon after the upcoming election. Because I can feel the urgency among many of you, wanting to elect somebody and get everything, kind of. Some want to go back to the good old days, and I don't think we ever had a good old day. I think it's a new nation that we would all get together and build. Because I do not think that we did not govern our nation to protect and serve all the people, but as citizens we allow the few we elected to extract or literally loot our wealth and resources, as that was the only way they knew to govern, like spoiled brats who had never even earned a penny, then beg or borrow. So we should have had these discussions many decades ago, but it's never too late. Even after the nation has hit rock bottom, it is acceptable that we are a bankrupt nation today in many aspects, not only financially. But I still hear some still want to take us back to 1948 and 56, and forgetting how many people were in dire straits then than today. Not only financially, in many aspects. Therefore, I advocate for real transformational changes in our electoral processes and how we govern ourselves, hopefully moving away from the system of central government that we have, putting all our cards, all our eggs in a central basket and hoping somebody will come and save us. We not only need to build our institutions on a strong democratic foundation and institutions, but build the guardrails that can tie them up together so they could not only function independently, but will not rotten, and also will be able to work in unison through an independent judiciary by, hopefully with independent mind and independent kind of minded people rather than political cults. To start with, I believe we will first need to kind of establish a much freer society. I do not believe not everyone is free in our country, where all people could enjoy the fruits of freedom and be able to enable their individuality as independent citizens through a free, independent, and participative system of governance. So that, we can all consider ourselves to be free when we have free markets to do whatever we want to do independently, free elections, free speech, which we take for granted until somebody comes and strangles our mouths, and ensure freedom to worship of their own choices. And we make a big deal and keep our religions in front of our nose rather than keeping them in the back of our minds when it comes to governance. As you know, the political deck in our country is stacked, rules are rigged for the established political parties to survive. If you look at the constitution, it's all developed for politicians to survive, political parties to survive. We even provide them a back door to return to governance, even after they're kicked out. As a result, they sponsor crime, fraud, and corruption as their central themes, even though we have socialist republic and democracy printed in front of our name, the nation's name. But I truly doubt if the framers of our current constitution had any idea what freedom, equality, justice, fundamental human rights, and independence of the judiciary meant, as democracy, republic, or socialists are mentioned only once in the preamble of the Constitution. Those words are not even explained and how they impact the people. It's like dressing it up to cover all our nakedness. If they did have any deeper belief in them, the framers of the Constitution would have ingrained what democracy, republic, and a socialist society would be for each citizen, and the rights and responsibilities the people would have to exercise. As a result, today some live above the laws. Lifestyles in par with high earners in Asia, while the majority has no voice. I believe the last week's presenter also pointed out these things. Therefore, I can't believe such parity can be fixed by tinkering rather than a 180-degree transformation. So let me take you to some of the slides that I've kind of put together. Let me share my screen. Hang on a second. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can. Yes, thank you.
Oh, thank you. So let me try to give you the full screen here.
Yeah.
All right. All good?
Yeah, great.
So what I would like to present is structural reforms for a robust framework for effective governance. I hope most of you will kind of disagree and challenge me. That's what I want to hear, so that I too can learn and share my ideas as well. So I like to start from the concept of what type of society should we become. We call ourselves a democracy, but I question that. We continue to remain as a status quo. We have a choice to continue to remain as a status quo of a hodgepodge of kleptocracy. Kleptocracy is defined as run by a bunch of corrupt politicians to enrich themselves sacredly outside the rule of law. I think that's what we have. To do anything today, we have to give kickbacks and bribes, and that's the norm in the country. I don't have to explain all that. So we have a choice to return to a monarch. I don't know if anyone even has that kind of thoughts, but today I believe we are an autocracy, a combination of an autocracy and an oligarchy. So autocracy is where one political party holds decision-making powers once they're elected. they're not answerable to anybody. They don't even listen to any other political parties or even the voice of the people. Partly we are sometimes an oligarchy, we are autocracy by the elites. It's a few people, it's constantly who's ruling the country. They don't even govern, they rule. Obviously, I don't think we would like to return to a dictatorship, but there had been times where some people were, asking for a dictator, or we can return to some plutocracy where society was ruled by people of the richest. Or, the next best thing, I would say, not the perfect thing, but the next best thing is to choose a more complex form of a democratic government. It is complex because it's a participative system of governance, which could be a system of governance of the people, by the people, for the people, only if we can define the rights in the people, the liberty and inalienable rights as central values to every citizen rooted in law as our republic constitution. So they cannot be voted away by a majority. So we think that when a majority wins, that we give them powers to do anything, and very often they oppressed the majority, and the oppress. We think they oppress only the minority, but in reality, they oppress even the majority of the people. This is why generations has been oppressed in our country. If you look around, the prevailing democracy operates without the powers in republicanism, as we are loved to be ruled by a majority while ignoring the minority and often the entire citizen. So let me move forward. If we are to become a more civilized society, I use the word civilized because we have a long way to go to get there. A well-developed system of governance that is a collective process for decision making and a decisive process for decisions needs to be implemented. Sometimes we reverse them, we don't make decisions, and when we make decisions, we do not implement them. Because we do have someone called an executive, but it's like executive thinks they have a different role rather than only executing laws that are passed by the legislature, and same thing does the legislature. They wait for the executive to tell them what to do. So we have a hodgepodge of governance in the country, a society that treats people equally and fairly, not as superiors or inferiors. A fair justice system, as conflict is part of any society of people. Rule of law, arguably the most basic requirement for civility. This is why I do not believe we have a civilized society, because we really don't have rule of law in the country. Establish guardrails to protect the independence in the branches of government. We do have so-called branches of government, but there are no guardrails. They jump from each other, they influence each other, and basically corrupt the system. Freedom of expression for the people, courts and media to hold power to account, enforce the rights of individuals, and shed light of public interest. So, most people, especially the media, are still scared of voicing their thoughts and ideas. So that's not a society of with freedom. The closest system we have to become a civilized society is to become a democratic republic. I say we still have to become a democratic society, although our name implies that we are a socialist republic, a social democratic republic, where state power will be vested in the majority of the people's wishes, and the people will need to protect human rights and freedom of every citizen, so people could freely exercise their will. So democracy on its own is not good enough. It needs to have the rights of the people strengthened through as a republic. Namesake, yes, we are a republic. Namesake, we are a democracy, but we have not taken things that seriously to exercise those rights in the people. In an effective democracy, government will be a constant consent of the people. We call it a popular sovereignty. Electoral system will be the source of political authority to exercise popular sovereignty, rule of law to ensure the rights of every individual, and democracy cannot be established by centralizing powers. This is what we have today. We have a centralized system of power because it naturally becomes an authoritarian system. Power devolution is essential to establish democracy. We don't even discuss about power devolution because we are afraid that race or religion will capitalize and take pieces of the country and things like that. These are some of the false myths that has been put into people's heads. To avoid excessive consideration of powers, separation but equal powers within the independent branches of government. We have never had this kind of system where power has been separated equally and where the branches had been able to function independent. Forget the central government, even locally, go to any city, very rarely you see the judiciary functioning independently and the politicians being able to, unable to influence the police and the other authorities. Introduce responsibilities and guardrails in branches and laws to check on the other branches. Establish democratic regional governments to further reduce the concentration of power in the center. This is very important, I believe. Not only separating powers in the central government, we need to remove some of the powers in the central government and bring it to the regions. Today, all decisions are made by the central government, and very often bills and policies in the parliament are discussed on the wishes of very often one person. It's the executive or the prime minister, whoever it is leading, but it's just one voice that we hear, and the other voices are very often unheard. We need to introduce people's rights to judicial recall public servants for abuse of power, crime, fraud, or corruption. This is a new policy that we need to introduce, so that we, as any individual, should have the right to recall a public representative for abuse of power, crime, fraud, or at least for corruption. So what I'm proposing is to have a mix of a regional government, at least to start with 5 regional governments and a central government, where the regional governance would be concentrated on the western, central, and Sabragamo, the Maya Rata, north central and northwestern, the Raja Rata, southern and Ruhunu, north and eastern, northern eastern. Because I come from the south, and the people in the fishing industry has been neglected forever, and that is because there is all decisions are made at the center, and none of them impacts the people at the bottom or in the regions. I believe Mahinda Rajapaksa was once Minister of Fisheries, but yet he had no interest in developing the fisheries industry down south. The responsibilities of each regional government would only be land, law, and order, including police. So police should not be at the heights of the central government. The economy, industries, and agriculture, local transportation, education, and health. The structure would be to have an elected governor, not an appointed governor by the president like what we have today. MPs elected by local electorates. We need to return to the old method of electorates. I am reluctant very often to return to anything that we had in the past, but this is something that we need to adapt, because those electorates were small and people knew their representative, and the representative knew the people. I'm proposing 3 positions to be elected: an Auditor General to ensure accountability and transparency, so that even if the central government's Auditor General screws up, there should be at least 5 other Auditor Generals who can voice on behalf of the people and challenge the Auditor General in the central government. Same thing with public defenders. Today we have an Attorney General. I don't know whether they even regard anything, any laws to protect the people, but very often most of their work is done to protect those in power. They work for the government rather than the Attorney General works for very often works for the government rather than for the people. So therefore, I'm talking about a public defender to defend the people, which we do not have today, because we all get together in forums like this, complain about things, but we do not have a mechanism to make that complaint to an authority, government authority, who will have the ownership and responsibility to take the ball and run and take action against them. So we wait till the next election either to kick them out or to be fooled by them. And also an election commissioner to appointed by, doesn't have to be elected, it's appointed by the governor to run the local elections. On the central governance, responsibilities for the regional government, sorry, it should be the central government, my typo there. To focus primarily only on finance and make sure constitutionally that funds are allocated to the regions, nothing can be held back, the necessary funds are allocated. Defense, in collaboration with the elected governors. Defense should not be run only in the wishes of the president, but in collaboration with the 5 governors. Foreign affairs, judicial administration, and all these things should be conducted in collaboration with the regional representatives, the national infrastructure, and the military. Unfortunately, this table is something very important that unfortunately it's truncated at the bottom. So let me see if I can. Oh, you could see the numbers, right? So to ensure regional voices are represented in the central government, you may not have seen this table before. You might need some time to think about it, but I'm just going to throw it at for you to think about it. It's not 256 or how many people in the government today, in the parliament? 250. Is it 255 or 250?
225.
Sorry, 225. So instead of the 225, regional voices are represented in the Senate government only with 155, and that to comprise of male, female, based on the population, not by not a token of female representation, and most importantly, each age group. We need to keep in mind these governments are of the people, and people comprise of different age groups and gender. So we have to take into consideration age brackets, and with the young people, we might think people 25, 29 are not matured enough, but yet we have to have their voices heard. And based on the population, these numbers may have changed today, but the point is that proportionate to the population, we need to have representatives representing the people of that age group from each gender as follows, and the total is about male 75 and female 80. And you might wonder how this is appointed, and I'll show that to you later. So and for the cabinet in the central government, elected president, limited powers to execute policies authorized by the legislation, unless it's an emergency. The president will not be a type of president that we have today. And I'm also an advocate that we need a CEO, someone to execute, not someone who's going to be a collaborative partner within the parliament, who will collude with the rest of the gang of MPs, like what we used to have, prior to 1977. So some of you may disagree with me on this, but what I'm advocating is we need a position of a CEO or an executive, but not with the type of powers we have granted them, with limited powers to perform one single task, which is to execute policies authorized by the legislature. Elected governors, the 5 governors should be in the cabinet to represent the voices of the regions. There'll be a minister of finance, defense, and they will all work in collaboration with the regional representatives, infrastructure, health, education, research, development, industries. As you can see, everything else, sports and all the other sundry activities should not be something that the government should be involved. They should be run by private entities, and if there is corruption there, then we should have a system of governance or system, where those tasks can be taken to task. And whether people in the government run sports, or whether the private sector runs it, it's the same kind of people. We don't import people from the moon somewhere to do them. So what we need are systems rather than people we think who are superior. Then another point is to strengthen the independence of the judiciary. As an independent judiciary is crucial to uphold the rule of law and safeguard citizen rights of every citizen, and ensure fairness and impartiality in the legal proceedings. Make it unlawful for public representatives to interfere with the judiciary. It should be, in black and white, so that they don't even think about interfering, public representatives interfering with any form of the judiciary. Supreme Court judges to be recommended by the governors in consultation with the local judiciary fraternities. President's role would only be a formality to appoint them when they are proposed by a body of the governors. In other words, to take this ownership of the president interfering with the judiciary out of the president's hands. In other words, I'm basically stripping some of the role of unconditional powers that we have granted the president. Review of judicial proceedings will be an administrative matter within the judicial administration, not a political matter. Then reforms for political pluralism in the electoral process. A bunch of tasks for to clean up our electoral process. Obviously free and fair elections, very much with high transparency. We have to demand transparency and public oversight for anything that's done on behalf of the people. Make Elections Commission an independent body under the oversight of the 5 governors. Since we heard fairy tale stories by a former elections commissioner when he didn't have the backbone to stand up against, I believe, Gotabaya election. What a joke that was. Return back to small electorates and conduct primary elections to represent the people. Remove barriers to entry for new political parties and independent representatives. I'm sure some of you, if you have tried to set up a political party or wanting to show your interest to contest, the difficulties that exist today. Promote independent and less represented candidates to contest. We should all take the ownership to promote such representation, open political parties to the same scrutiny as any public company. Their budgets should be transparent, their processes should be transparent, and at the same time, they need to comply with equal rights to everybody and equal representation. This concept about Tamil political parties and Muslim political parties and Buddhist political parties should be banned because they restrict everyone else participating in them. Yes, they might be deprived, but at the same time, when they try to advocate rights based on race, religion, and so such petty adapted elements, we create discrimination once again. We need to equalize campaigning of political parties and independent candidates. That's a big task. Equal and free access to public media. We need to encourage small representatives being able to come forward by equalizing such access. Looking at what prevails today, these might be daunting tasks, but needs to be done. Offer public grants to match private funds to cover qualified expenses. In other words, we need to find ways to allocate public funds to whoever is interested in coming forward, because we need to encourage representation of people, because that's a service that they're trying to do. And either we avoid such representation and attract only the crooks who come forward, or we need to find ways to encourage such genuine representation to come forward. All candidates to declare income, assets, and criminal background. Limit campaign spending for each candidate, and limit spending of personal funds. Just because somebody has all the funds, that doesn't mean they should have the right to throw money at people, especially when they're trying to represent the rest of the people. We should strengthen civil liberties, guarantee the exercise of the freedom of speech, assembly, and association. We have these things on paper, but very often they are disregarded. So in other words, whenever there is a disregard, people should have we should have a mechanism where people should be able to file action against them, so that those in power will never think twice about oppressing such fundamental rights of freedom. Open the government to be a prosecutor for inaction of wrongful action by regional governments or the general public. Very often governments come, make promises, and and they gain power, and and they forget about their promises, and because we don't have any action against them to prosecute. So such inaction should be prosecuted, because they're making promises to deliver, and if they're not delivering, that's a failure. Strengthen the media's freedom as an essential pillar for a robust democracy. We need to liberate media from the government control. There's no business for a government to have a propagation machine in their hands. We need to liberate the media from the government control, very, 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 very much so. Develop a culture, a carrot and stick for journalists to search for the truth. Truth is a very scarce resource in the country today, whether it's in public sphere or in private matters. One-to-one, I don't know who to trust today in talking to another person. Many people want, when you speak to them, they want to impress by saying whatever they have in their minds rather than speak the truth. Protect journalists' rights as messengers for the truth. Introduce watchdogs for the civil society to flag false propaganda and balance against censorship. Also, civic education to schools. We had to reintroduce civic education and strengthen the education, and also have programs for the public. because people, I don't know if how many people would have even looked at the constitution we have, or realize any of the rights that they've been granted, or know how to fight for them. We really don't have a method to fight against them. To develop an informed society so that people will participate. And if we don't have certain rights in the constitution, anyone in the public should be able to raise them up and fight for them. To have any race or religion as superior or something else as inferior is ridiculous to have anything in a constitution like that. So we need to start educating the public as well as the children, the next generation that's coming up. Establish regional governance. Regional governments elected by the people, like I mentioned earlier, a governor to execute legislative bills and act as the CEO of the regional government. Legislators representing each electorate to enact laws. Governor to appoint representatives to serve the legislature in the central government. This is a brand new concept you may not have heard before. Instead of appointing a separate set of representatives for the central government, the 156 number that I was referring to would be representatives that the regional governments would loan out to the central government for a limited period. We can discuss the details at another time. Or if you have any questions, I can answer them. Elect a district level public defender and an auditor general to enhance oversight and protection of citizens' rights to ensure accountability and transparency. This is a brand new role that I'm proposing because other than just complaining, no one has a public defender where we can ask them to follow up on certain issues related to the public, and obviously an auditor general. So when we have 5 auditor generals, maybe in addition to a central auditor general, if the central government needs one, which means we will have 5 different sets of eyes looking at the process of each other. They will not only be responsible for themselves, it needs to be a checks and balances among the 5 governments as well. Police will be administered locally to protect the local communities, not the politicians alone. As you know, today the police, I believe it's 40% or 50% of the police is used to protect a handful of politicians, which is a waste of resources today. Reforms in transparency and accountability to develop public trust. As you know, trust is a scarce resource in the country, and integrity is another very scarce resource in the country. All public services to be open, accessible, and locally available to the public. This business of where people have to come to Colombo to get everything done and incur difficulty should no longer be acceptable. Roles and responsibilities clearly declared of the public servants. Today very often we don't know what people do, even in the central government. If we ask what the role and responsibility of the president or the chief executive, it's very difficult to describe what their role is, other than saying he is responsible for everything. Introduce penalties for public servants based on the trust they breached of the public. This is another brand new concept, which is if the penalty for violations by the chief executive should be much greater than anyone below the position of the executive, because it's a greater trust the executive holds, trust of the people. Introduce recall powers to citizens through a judicial process to prosecute corrupt public officers. Reforms in the security sector, place military and police under civilian oversight. Today, no one knows what happens in the military other than the people in the government. and introduce technology to strengthen transparency, communication, and accountability across every step in law enforcement. And we need to start doing the same thing for all other sectors of the government. This is where I'm involved in my professional life. I help local governments in the West implement technology to improve their processes, including code enforcement. An example is that we have a piece of software that where it's an app in the phones where if there's a pothole, the app detects it and communicates that to the authorities, and they take action, and no one needs to even call them. So we have things like that. In other words, to utilize technology, which is one of the cheapest ways of implementing solutions or communicating, right? That's implementing is a total different part of it, but at least to be informed so that not only the authorities, even the public would be aware that there are 5 potholes in this area and nothing has happened for 10 days, that kind of thing. Military to be confined to defending the state and its interests against external threats instead of citizens, and make the military more efficient to reduce costs. So some of the reforms to develop international cooperation, I don't want to go through this. This is, as some of you may know, if you have dealt with the foreign services, that's probably one of the very pathetic divisions that we have in the government today. The foreign services, embassies are terrible, and they send political goons to house them, and they don't know what they're doing. So obviously, we lack lots of a major role that needs to be done by all these embassies. Reform for reconciliation and consensus building. Teach skills in consensus building. We rarely know how to develop, we don't learn these skills, negotiation skills, conflict resolution are not even taught in our schools. Develop methods for rehabilitation of prisoners and victims of past conflicts and wars. This has been conveniently ignored, hoping they will go away. And anyone would vouch that if you had experienced a personal atrocity of any of your family members, they never go away, and you tend to live through them through generations. So they have to be resolved. Address historical grievances to ensure people are heard, at least heard, by investigating and exposing truth. The truth needs to come to the surface, however bitter they may be, in order for reconciliation and to foster social cohesion. Sometimes we might think that it doesn't affect me, it's somebody else's problem, but we cannot forget that we all live on the same earth when we live in a small country. It will be a long, definitely, this is going to be a long and hard journey to return to normalcy. I do not consider our nation has ever been in normalcy. So we need to accept that 7 decades of destruction cannot be recovered from an election or by any one person, and will require a multi-pronged approach. I'll bet with you, even if you send me to the government and with the type of excessive power and access to free corrupt practices, even a prophet would get corrupted in our system. So there's a lot of cleanup that needs to happen in the so-called Berry Lake that we have in our government before we can throw anyone into the mud. Except that people has been fooled and kept in false myths within an extractive system to benefit a few for many decades. What we don't have is a system that enables people, but it's a extractive system. It's very important to realize this. Change cannot be by tinkering and fixing uppers, but through multi-pronged reforms and transformations, so that we can gradually transition to some form of true democracy. So we need to build trust from ground up, and we also need policies for effective governance. So that's my few slides of presentation. I hope I haven't taken much time of yours. I'm open for Q&A.
Thank you very much, Anura. That was a very good summary and some innovative thinking in there as well. I think there'll be lots of questions. In the meantime, yeah, there is one question raised already. Two people have questions already. And just before going to the question, I just want a little clarification on this regional election of Auditor General, Defender, and so on, because there are different skill sets. So how are you going to elect a person? Say is something like saying, can we elect a doctor to a particular region without having any qualification?
No, obviously not. Exactly. So it has to be a professional who has a skill set. It has to be a, for example, now in the West we have a czar for healthcare. We have someone in charge of healthcare. I don't. Let me think of the position. Name of the position was, it's an Indian guy who's heading it. I don't recall the name of the position, but there is. So no one else can take that position. Just like the attorney general, no one else can become an attorney general. It has to be an attorney. So it's a similar concept.
Right, there are lots of hands raised so far.
Please.
So if you put your slides down, we'll be able to see
Sure.
everybody.
Sure. So
thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
Let me take my thing out.
Okay, yeah. So let's go into the order. So Captain Pfizer is first. Pfizer, yeah.
Give me a second so that I can, let me get out of
Just
here.
stop sharing, then it will
Yeah. Stop share. There you are.
Yeah.
Okay, all good.
Yeah, you will see everybody, whoever who is speaking now. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, so Captain, we'll go with Pfizer first. Pfizer? Pfizer, hello. You are muted still.
Okay. Thank you, Chula, for another informative week of information. And thank you, Anura, for a wonderful presentation. I have a few concerns regarding the presentation. Yes, it's good ideas to divide and govern and have all these checks and balances in place. I do agree. But it will never happen overnight, like you said. It may take 2 or 3 generations to change this system. But what I would like to know is, having too many auditor generals, too many compliance people, too many things, is also going to have a route for corruption, because they're going to bribe the local guy, and the central government is not going to get to know anything, right? So they also create competition within Sri Lankans. If you have 5 governors, 5 provinces running each other, I think the current system is good, but we need to improve and tighten legislation and give Parliament the power, the Prime Minister to run the Parliament, and the President to hold the executive presidency. That's my personal view, because on that particular area, because the system is there, we just have to fine tune it and run it. Too many people in office, I do agree. This has to be downsized. Now, coming to the question of, you were talking about Islamic parties, Tamil parties, and all. I totally agree. This has to be abolished, because that creates hatred. Because we grew up in school days having Christians and Muslims and all together as one family, one friends. We didn't have this division. It all happens after certain years, when Sinhala medium came into force in schools and things like that, Tamil medium. That created hatred. So I totally agree, that has to be abolished, and people should not bar these kind of parties coming into Parliament or legislation. That I totally agree. As for the topics that you presented, the point is, how will we go about this? Who are we going to affiliate it? We all talk, we have ideas, we have this great vision. How are we going to steer it? How are we going to go forward on it? Who are we going to align with it to make this change? That's the question we have to ask coming this election, because all of us have ideas, beautiful ideas. We have all lived overseas. What is the right we are given foreigners, Sri Lankans who are living overseas, the right to vote the right candidate? They don't even have the right to vote. They have to come to Sri Lanka to vote, right? What about using the embassies to allow them to vote, right? And let them also contribute to the society. There are very good academics all over here. Doctor himself is overseas. How can he contribute from overseas, right? He can work with the consulates, embassies, right, with the ambassadors to bring those change from those countries. But we have not used those resources. Like you said, the foreign policy or foreign department is a zero. It's all cronies who are running the show. You know, the defense attaché is just there for the sake of, holiday. He's given a title just after he retires from the military. There are people who have to look at what can these foreign countries contribute to Sri Lanka and vice versa. Nobody looks at what businesses can be taken from Sri Lanka to those countries and sold. Same way, vice versa, from those countries bring business into Sri Lanka. Those are the duties of the embassies, to create revenues, generate income to the nation. But they spend the money, So this is why we end up taxpayers. So we have to look at all these things in a holistic form, and how better we can bring the change. So let's see how we can drive this process with everybody, select a candidate who we can get this process being changed and work towards that. That's my personal view. As for your presentation, it can work, the five governors thing, but I think let's keep our provinces as it is. Let every, there is 22 districts, if I'm wrong, in Sri Lanka, or I may have forgotten, somebody can correct me, but let these governors run their own shows, or mayors, they can call them mayors or whatever it is, and let them develop their own infrastructures within their areas. But accountability-wise, I want the government to be held in one umbrella. Because if you let the smaller powers to hold power, there is going to be corruption in different areas, and it'll be a miserable thing to solve. So I think everything should be centralized. Defense should be under the president, not under the elected governors, because the country's defense, the intelligence, everything has to be under one man. But the policing can be under the parliament, the local policing, criminality, judiciary, all can be under the system of parliament, accountable to the people. This is my view. This is my criticism. I'm open to your views and on that, Anura, please.
Thank you for the beautiful, beautiful feedback.
Any comments on that, please?
Yeah. The idea of maybe one attorney general in a region getting corrupted. That's exactly why I'm advocating for multiple different. Today, if we have one attorney general who's probably, we've had corrupted attorney generals, but we had nothing to do. We could not do anything to the person because it's one person, and none of us had rights, and that person served the president. That's all. So, but by having at least, more than one, let's say 5, at least there will be 10 eyes in the issue, and I'm hoping 5 people will not keep quiet when one person does something wrong. So the idea is to have more eyes on the issue. So if one person, yes, one person or 2, and I'm hoping all 5 will not get corrupted at the same time. But at the same time, to have more eyes on them, that's one. Number 2 is for the public to have the right to recall. So to introduce both those rights, so there'll be a much more of a prevention of people becoming corrupt and abuse of power. then the idea of
Anura,
yeah, go ahead.
Anura, may I touch on that point?
Please do.
As for the Attorney General, what I would say is I agree with you, but I would call them on the regional level public prosecutors instead of an Attorney General. Because Attorney General,
you're right. You're right.
Is a national thing. You cannot put them in some areas. You should have public prosecutors who will look after the interests of the citizens.
Yeah, public defenders.
Yes,
I do totally agree. I was using the word Attorney General just to relate to what is going on today. Yes, you're right. I agree. Totally agree. And the idea of you had concerns of competition. That's exactly what I want. I want each of the regions to compete with each other and collaborate with each other as well. This goes on in many other countries, I believe, where regions are run by governors who compete and collaborate with each other to bring revenue into their areas, and they cannot survive. You know, as a CEO of a corporation, I believe the primary job is to bring revenue. The primary job of a CEO is, if you can't bring revenue into your institution, you have no, the CEO doesn't have a role. CEO cannot say that, my job is to manufacture something or do something else. Their primary responsibility is the top line of things. Yes, bottom line is important as well, but they need to compete with each other and bring their own revenue, and we should grant that powers and responsibility for them to partner with regions in India, regions in other countries, in the neighboring countries, and bring revenue into their own regions.
Yeah,
because no one else is going to do that. Go ahead.
On this particular point, sir, yes, I agree with competition, but they should compete based on the national vision and mission, based on the national strategy, national law. If they have the individual laws, it's going to be an ABAC. You see, look at Texas and Michigan, they have different laws. Some say alcohol is allowed at 18, some say alcohol is allowed at 21. No, that has to be a standardized law. And there has to be standardized KPIs set for these people to account for to the central government. Then, yes, it's workable. But competition going cutting throat and outsourcing somebody, you're making infighting within Sri Lankans. That is not correct. That's my view on that.
No, I do agree with you. Yes, there has to be some cohesive policies that we can agree on, and at the same time give them the liberty. Today we don't have people in the regions, even either governors or any other representatives. I don't think they even have right to, they can bring an investor into their area on their own. So we have to wait till the president decides to bring an investor into my neighborhood. So we are all waiting for that one person to serve us. And how can you even serve? How can just one person serve 22 districts? Is impossible, even if he wants to.
Yeah, that is because there is no KPIs. There is no standard of development. There's no plan. There's no vision for each district. What can you get from these resources? So I think your plan will work if they had each province, they give their vision to the president. Say, look, this is what my province can give to you. This is what my people or my voters want in this particular area, to build a dam, to build a highway, to build a train station, or whatever they want. They have to give their ideas. So the governor itself becomes innovative. They become CEOs who looks for technology, like you said, to innovate his processes, right? So these are the things. So the president has to dictate and say, okay, this is my vision. I want each one of you to contribute for my vision and tell me what you need from your areas to develop your area. So those are held. They are held with KPIs to help the accountable. So then definitely your plan will work in that way.
And just one other comment regarding the defense. Yes, definitely, defense will be under the president. But what I'm proposing is, it should not only be under that one person, but to have an oversight by the 5 governors. In other words, I'm trying to throw some extra eyes to prevent abuse in any area. That's basically the idea of having an oversight.
Well, you are in the app business. I suggest you create an app for defense where people can inform intelligence, for
That's right.
example, right? In those days, the Chinese ways, they will ask the neighbor, who, if you are a newcomer to your neighborhood, they will go and find out who is your neighbor, where did he come from? And that information is passed to state intelligence, right?
Yeah.
So this is the old-fashioned way, which still China operates, right?
Mhm.
So you don't know a boy is begging from you, he's an operative of the Chinese PLA government who is giving information, right? So we need intelligence. Yes, I agree, because we are going with India, we are going with China, and they have people who comes with shell companies and they start spying on, local government people and things like that, and feeding information through their consulates. So again, people, I agree, check and balance, but the military, core military has to be under the pressure. You cannot have the people running a military, because you then have a lot of other things happening, defense. But the policing, yes, policing must be under the regional commander, or for that particular region, or under that governor, so he can control his area of policing, so.
Yeah, because I think the best example I used to recall is, I don't know whether it happens today in London, where the cops walk the beat and they know the neighborhood. They used to. I don't know if it happens today. They knew the neighborhood. They knew the neighborhood kids, and there was much more peace then.
Thank you, and thank you for that discussion. There are 3 people waiting. Thank you for both of you for having that very, very highly charged discussion. But that is what we need to come to consensus eventually. Shall we ask Lasil? Lasil, yes, Lasil.
Please do.
Lasil?
Thank you, Chula. Thank you. And thanks, Anura. It was a very good presentation. At the same time, I think even Chula and Ifas also commented with regard to this Auditor General, having 5 Auditor Generals. I think I'm also inclined to support there should be 5 Auditor Generals. Only thing that we need is the kind of reforms, because, this system was operating very well for a long period of time. But with the politicization only, it had become a problem. Now, what is really needed there, actually, to give the kind of professional development, because, they were not given the necessary training. They were not even given various scholarships. Sometimes I was told, because, they want the Auditor General to be kept completely away from all that. Now, unfortunate thing is, there has been even constitutional amendments. Now look at the 19th Amendment. 19th Amendment was the creation of the National Audit Commission. And with the 20th Amendment, they repealed that and they brought it down. So these kind of things can't be allowed in future. Because if you take a step forward, you can't take 2 steps backward. That should not be encouraged. One other thing, basically, now military. I personally think, it has to be generally under the president, yes. But the parliament has a major role. I remember having read somewhere during the Second World War, I think it was during that period, if that was correct, that was French President Clemenceau or someone, he had said defense is a matter that should not be decided by one person. It has to be taken up even in the parliament. It should be a collective decision, because parliament is also at fault in most of these instances, because they have been really biased. Even now you can see they don't deliver justice, they don't ensure justice. So it's a matter where even parliament needs to be cleaned up. And there are other issues like defense, even finances, all that has been completely entrusted under Article 148. That's a matter which is coming totally under parliament, the finances. Imagine their main job is to manage finances, but that too has been completely given up. In addition, there was a law that was established in 2003, Act number 3, Fiscal Responsibility Act. Even that has not been completely, it has been completely ignored and not adhered to. So this is the situation. I want to go back with regard to even foreign services. Foreign services in a really desperate position, because there again is politicization. Up to 70s, we were able to see there were officers who were selected on merit, and thereafter they have, even recently, about 2 weeks ago, there were 40 vacancies, and there was a written test competitive examination. Out of the 40, only 20 have been selected on merit. They have somehow managed to put or at least bring in 20, I don't know, from somewhere, from through different other sources. So this kind of things cannot be permitted. And on the other hand, there are like you spoke about a CEO. This concept is something new. Actually, no harm having a CEO, but he has to be completely, whatever said and done, given a function. If that is the case, there has to be deputy CEOs even at the provincial level also. But I thought we have been discussing, I think I discussed the same thing with even Chula. If the president, after all, is a nominal figurehead, the executive, and if there are other, I would say, in the provinces, a deputy president, because his duty is also to carry out his government policies, all that. I mean, there is a little bit of lacuna, some kind of problem there. There is no direct link, because the politician, it has been handed over to the chief minister. I would personally prefer, if you really think in terms of devolving better devolving power in a more efficient way, because unfortunately, with the chief minister in the place, actually they look at everything in a political whatever way. So what I personally think is, it has to be completely taken away from the chief minister. If there is a chief minister, he has to run the political part of it. The executive must be completely independent. I remember even FAS spoke about giving independence to the judiciary. Actually, independence needs to be given even to the executive, because the officers in the public sector also needs to be given total independence. Now, see, look at the police, and look at the divisional secretary. All of them are appointed with the approval of the local member of parliament. This system should be completely done away with, stopped. So naturally, if there's depoliticization, I think things would be a lot better. Also, another thing I just wrote down, what it is. No, I mean accountability. I think it was Fast who said about accountability. It has to be like what he said, under one umbrella. The public sector, I mean, for all purposes, there are two areas: political and administrative. Actually, the administrative, maybe those days, it was the chief of the administration, public administration, or the relevant ministry. So on that basis, it was very clearly demarcated. I think that system needs to be strengthened without any political whatever involvement in political say in those areas. Now look at the IGP. IGP has to depend on the minister, and the minister says, yesterday I saw, he says, you all have been given guns, all that, use them. How can he say that? He had to be, I mean, if it was a government where there is rule of law, I think he will be taken to task, because that is that is not his job. He has to oversee the political and then implementation part of it, because he is responsible back again to parliament to ensure the policies are implemented. So it's a bit of a problem where there's a mix up. I think these are the things what we need to understand, discuss at length even further. I'm happy with most of the things what both actually Andrew said. That's a good thing. It's a lot better to discuss this and go forward again. I mean, let's do it even in the future. Thank you so much.
Yes, Anura. You're muted, Anura, I think. Anura, you're muted, yeah.
Yeah. I often hear Lassell talking about the good old days. I beg to kind of disagree with you. We've never had, since we gained independence. I'll just make this common remark. Where since we gained independence, we never had a system of governance where we were able to rise up from where we were to something better at any time. It was all a bunch of elites trying to run the country with their limited skill set, and it may have been better than what we have today, but that doesn't mean that was what we deserved to have. Because if we look back during the 50s and the 60s, what we have was a struggling nation. And to have a struggling nation, I don't want to consider that as the good old days. Maybe few of us, our lives would have been better. Our lives would have been kind of comfortable. That doesn't mean everyone's lives were comfortable during that time. Anyway, that's just a comment. I really don't want the nation to go back to where we were. It needs to go back to a new nation where we all deserve. There are there's 22 million people in the country. We need a nation where we all deserve to have. So I don't think we've ever had a time where everyone was comfortable. There was a handful of people. Our lives would have been good, but that doesn't mean it was a good old time. So that's one. Number two is yes, I agree with the concept also with with the military being under but the military needs to be under one responsible person. The role of the parliament is primarily to make laws, nothing else. The ministers today, ministers and MPs has taken the right to order things to be performed by department, police, and other entities. But that's just abuse of power. So we have to move away from that kind of abuse, because I once served I implemented a project for the central bank at one time, and I had orders like that from various ministries. But honestly speaking, I didn't care tuppence about them, because I did my job. But at the same time, it was not a popular task. And there was another, I remember a gentleman that I worked with who was the chairman of the BOI, and he had a similar situation as well. He was an excellent chairman, but that doesn't mean some of the politicians, he listened to the shuffles given by the politicians. Because while these politicians will try to abuse their power, the administrators also should have a backbone to stand up and speak for themselves. That is lacking as well. So I throw the blame at both sides of the coin. Then yes, the foreign ministry, I believe fundamentally is they have not been given a mandate to either develop an economy or contribute to an economy or bring investments, or they are just sent as thankful jobs for them to have some retirement somewhere. And again, something else that I kind of disagree is president's role should no longer, we should not go back to this nominal role of a president, but it has to, there's a very important role for a president, which is to execute policies. There has to be someone held accountable to execute things that has been passed by the legislature. If we don't have someone responsible to execute things, nothing is going to happen. Only laws will be passed. And at the same time, If the executive fails to execute policies, we have one person to keep them accountable. So that's that. And Chief Minister pointed, but yeah, this the idea of having elected governors is to make sure that we will have people representing the public who will be accountable to the people rather than to politicians. That's the basic idea of having local governors elected by the people, so that they will constantly, for example, I'm from down south. If you have a governor in down south, and that governor's focus will constantly be about developing the fisheries industry, the farming industry, and local jobs and things like that, he or she cannot be just complaining that I could not improve jobs, because that's because that person's ineffectiveness.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Anura. We got 3 more people waiting. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing the experiences, because that's what we need, because we have a theory on one side and reality on the other side. So we need to strike the balance to get what we're trying to do.
Can I just add just a few more sentences? Chula, please.
I've got 2 other people waiting. Anything to do, anything new, or you? Okay, go ahead then. Go tell me quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, I fully agree, because like Andrew said, now even during the period from the time of independence up to 70s, actually there have been serious errors, and most of the things have been taken up and discussed, but the problem is the public officer has no say with regard to implementation. Now I'll quote one example. In 1956, I've been telling everywhere, in 1956, when there was a serious strike, Bandaranaike had said, go and stop that strike, to the IGP. He had the backbone to say, no, that's not my job. That can't be done. That's another story on that basis. And he never wanted to do that. Similarly, there have been similar instances. Now, what I'm trying to say, in 1970s and 80s, there has been number of administrative reports, particularly one in the 80s, like Shelton Manasinghe. That's a fantastic report highlighting most of the serious drawbacks that was seen during the period. So what happened was, none of those things were taken seriously, and they never took steps to improve. In 1970s, what did they do? They broke down the whole system, and opened up a can of worms, in that sense, I would say. So what I'm trying to say, there are stories, there are incidents, but now we have to look at the whole big picture, because you have to look at the culture or whatever that existed here, and you have to introduce new laws, new systems, so that you will be able to carry forward, looking at the international standards. Let's see. That's my suggestion, please.
Yeah, thank you, Lasil. It's actually basically we are talking about politicized professionalism. So that's where the problem lies in some of these things. Okay, Basil. Yes, Basil, please. Basil?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You see, I agree with almost, not almost, entirely with everything that is being said. But I have a question. How do we get there? All these things that are being told about, this situation improving in so many ways, good. Because if we brush aside the last 75 years as if it did not exist, if we be trying to make a new page, like we try to write a new book, or that approach, it doesn't work, because nations have never been built that way. Nations have been built by when people in nitty-gritty detail examine their failures. Why did we fail? In other words, also, did we really fail? It's a mix. The answer will be mixed, because we were a colony, and colony is not a sovereign country. We were not a nation. We were not a nation state. We began a nation state in 1948. And who were the people who started, who were given the ruling power? They were just the servants of the British who were doing various kinds of services. The British decided, we are going, now you take it. Were they prepared? Did they know what they're taking over? In fact, if you take the Donmore Commission, you find that these people are saying, don't give it to us now. We are not ready. That's a different, not that I agree with that position, but the thing is, we have had an amateur state of developing a nation. Amateur stage. We are still in that amateur stage. Here, we should examine nitty-gritty detail. Why did we fail? There were a lot of strenuous efforts in a limited way to get somewhere. For example, to build a civil service is no easy task. If you compare with many other countries around, I have worked in about 10 Asian countries. In many of these, civil services are not being established. So even in a minimum way, the beginning of a certain degree of civil service, when we had to develop a policing system, our Sri Lankans were not even willing to come to the police because they did not want to arrest people. If you go into the history, then, because they were afraid, if you arrest another person, that fellow will come and kill you. So we have gone through about not 75, little over 200 years of experimentation, within which at a certain stage, unfortunately, we gave up the ideals. Today, we are all what you say is built on certain ideals. If you accept those ideals, what you are saying can be done. But we rejected the idea of the representative democracy. We have in the paper, on paper, we have representative democracy. What the 1978 Constitution did was challenge it in a severe way. But in 1982, in the referendum, we rejected it altogether. 6 years extension of the parliament. Where on earth, a democracy or anything to deal with the representation comes in. So today there were debates inside particularly the educated classes, whether democracy is a good thing for Sri Lanka. An overwhelming idea was no. And that is what the confusion that has been there now is that we have not settled these issues. So there need to be a political intellect. What we are missing is at every level, we lack intellect. I once wrote a pamphlet called Deterioration of the Legal Intellect in Sri Lanka. Today, you go to any of these, many of these people, basics, they don't understand about the law, the innocence of the accused. The whole system has been changed in a way to challenge this thing while in the book it is there. So every little premise on which rule of law is based is being challenged. So there is a crisis going on. And unless we try to understand that crisis, in other words, it is upheavals and the way we deal with upheavals that creates nations. It is nothing to be surprised to have an upheaval. Last, from about 1970 up to now, is a period of upheavals in Sri Lanka. And every nation you go into, sometimes for centuries, thousands of years, can't settle a problem. So these struggle, but in the process, people develop an intellect. Where is the critical intellect? And ask, why did we fail to create a, why such a despicable situation in the police? We talk as if, some small thing can be done with the police and it will be okay. Today, police and criminalization is openly talked about the issue. drug dealers and the police are working to, where do you have like that? And you get a criminal as the IGP. You get a person who rejects the rule of law basically as an attorney general. And every area, these basics have been given up. So we have on the one hand a good, sort of a nice flowers on the top, very nice words about democracy, this and that, and all these things. Beneath none of these things, there's no struggle. That the fact that there is nothing is happening is one thing. There's no internal intellectual struggle. What Sri Lanka needs more than anything else is an openly people talking. Why did we fail in this? Why did we fail in this? Why did we fail in the other one? And in that process, come out with concretely studying why. How is it that a policeman can beat up a boy to an extent that he will lose his testicles? And that's the country we are talking about. So the rosy picture that we want to have, that, you know, when you do this, that and all that, everything is fine. And the actual reality are completely two different things. Unless we are able to intellectually bring this together for a very deeper discussions, we will never get there.
Thank you, Basil, for that. And actually, I must congratulate everybody who is speaking up and raising the concerns. That's what we need. And the inclusivity of getting all these things responded to, or at least trying to respond to these. So thank you very much. Anura, any comments on for what?
Well, I just have to applaud Basil. You know, I had to agree with everything what he highlighted.
I think that's what is speaking up about, and that's actually making an impact, which is very good, at least in a small scale. So let's listen to Ranjan as well. Ranjan, yes,
Yeah.
Ranjan.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chula. Anura, it was a very good presentation. I say this because especially you introduced some new ideas into this dialogue, the national dialogue. Those ideas are they are new. For the first, I'm hearing them for the first time. So congratulations for those new ideas from you. Having said that, I have 3 points. You know, United Kingdom, England, does not have a constitution as we understand the term. Nevertheless, they have been very, very successful in this world. One of the most successful countries in the world. They built an empire over which it was said that the sun never set. Now, how did they, without a constitution, the way we understand the word, how did they become so successful, whereas all these 76 years we have been talking about constitutions? All these 76 years, right? We have one constitution, Jennings's constitution, that is not good. Then we have a Republican constitution, 72, that is not good. Then 78, we have another constitution, that is also not good. Now we want to have a fourth constitution. Then now look at America. One constitution only from ground zero, that is jungle, from the jungles, right to the top. Just one constitution. You know, this reminds me of what Alexander Pope wrote about 200 years ago. Forms of government let fools contest. Whatever is best administered is best. Now, talking about the American Constitution, and I think you are in America, I can see I forget that San Francisco Bridge behind. The name doesn't come straight to me. Right.
I have heard it, the American success has been summed up in relation to the Constitution in just one line. That government is best that governs least. I'm sure you would have heard that. That government is best that governs least. Whereas we are moving in the opposite direction. We are having more and more government. You see, more and more government. The more government we have, the less justice, less freedom people enjoy, less development people enjoy. And finally, we have now hit rock bottom. This is the first comment I have to make. Then the second point is with regard to taking the government, citizens taking the government to court in the event of the government disregarding the rules. Anura, in Sri Lanka, you see, no ordinary citizen, average citizen, can resort to litigation to obtain justice, simply because it is so very, very expensive. No ordinary, not even a middle class citizen can afford justice, because the price of justice is so very, very high. A reasonably good lawyer, an average a PC for the President's Council, won't appear for less than 1 million rupees. His fee is 1 million rupees. How many can, and the cases go on for how long? Then now one fundamental rights case filed by depositors of a company that collapsed. They filed a fundamental rights case that went on for 13 years. 13 years, 1-3. So, we have to, if we are going to still help the poor, the citizen, we have to think of finding a solution to help him find the finances. I was thinking of the Legal Aid Commission. We have a Legal Aid Commission, and it might be a good idea for the government to allocate funds to the Legal Aid Commission in the budget. That could be one solution. Very briefly, that is my second point. The final point I have is with regard to the military. You came very close to something that is very, very close to my heart. You didn't go all out to say what I have been saying, even when I was serving in the army. You didn't go that far. But even in the army, I was saying, does Sri Lanka need an army? Does Sri Lanka need an army? When Maithripala Sirisena president, when he addressed the United Nations General Assembly, he told the whole world, Sri Lanka does not have enemies. Now, he told the whole world, Sri Lanka does not have enemies. Now, we have been having an army since independence for 76 years. We have never had a single threat of an invasion. We have never had nobody invaded us, and nobody will want to invade us also. See, nobody will want this headache. I remember when J.R. Jayawardena was the president, and there was a fear that India might send its troops here. He was trying to persuade Margaret Thatcher to come to Sri Lanka. She rejected the idea outright. She rejected the idea outright. You might remember that. Some of you might even remember that. You see, who wants to come here and get this headache? You see, take over this headache. These countries have enough problems themselves. In fact, I peddled this idea when I was in the army. I mentioned it, that Sri Lanka does not need an army. I want to tell two more points in regard to that. General Eisenhower and General Douglas MacArthur, the two most successful, I would say, generals in the army, generals in the world today. Why do I say that? The world we are living in today and the comforts we enjoy are all thanks to them. If they had not won that war in the West and in the East, we won't be living the kind of life we are living today. Right? What did both of them say? They both condemned war as a tool of resolving conflicts. I can quote them. They both condemned war, whereas our generals are extolling war. Those are military men with ethics. We have military men without ethics. And I paid a heavy price for vocalizing these views quite openly and candidly when I was in the army. Right. I hope sanity will prevail. There's one more point. See, there's one more point. There was one more point. Just a minute, please. I'll complete only with one more point. There is another reason why our experience has taught us there is one why we should not have an army, because it gives our opportunistic politicians Dutch courage. They say irresponsible things, rebel rousing things, because they have the knowledge that they have the army to protect them. This security they feel that they can obtain drives them to say irresponsible things, make rebel rousing remarks. With that, I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Ranchan. Anura?
You know, they were very, very important and very, very enlightening 3 points, I would say. The first point that he raised, that, you know, it is not constitutions that we need to learn how to implement them, how to utilize them. Whether we have a constitution or not, we have not been a society, you know, who had the civility, let me use that word, who had the civility to either govern to serve each other. So I totally agree. Okay, let's forget about new constitutions. Let's take at least one that is in our constitution and see why we can't even honor them and implement them. You know, we don't do that. So there is a breakdown in ethics, as he also mentioned. There is a breakdown in moral code. There's a breakdown, more importantly, will of the people, as well as, you know, forget the will of those who are governing, but the will of the people to demand what we want has been lacking. So whether, you know, I totally agree. Having a constitution, in other words, a rule book. You know, if I want to play a decent soccer game, I don't need a rule book. I would play a decent soccer game without hurting each other, but with the primary objective of scoring a goal. So we have some social downfalls. I totally agree with him, and that is another area that we need. The civility has to be developed among us. The other one is you know, the idea of you know, the general public doesn't have funds to obviously prosecute the government, and that's exactly why I was proposing a public prosecutor or a public defender, so that concerns of the public can be represented using public funds to represent those the general public, so that the public doesn't have to bear that burden. Then with the military, yes, I'm also an advocate of, you know, I asked the question too, and I didn't want to go as far asking the same question as why do we need the military? Obviously, it's very difficult. I have been struggling with this. I have been thinking very hard to have a single reason. Is it? I think I've written about this once. Are we scared that Maldives will come and invade us, or or do we even have the might to fight against India? We really don't have a justification to have a military other than to oppress our own people. That is all we've been using our military, to oppress our own people. And Ranjan kind of reminds me of myself constantly, for trying to clean up wherever I go. I try to clean up the system as well, and question why we, even in my company that I work for, I asked him, why are we doing this, and why, I constantly ask this question. I can just imagine him being in the military and asking, why do we need a military? That's exactly the type of questions I think we should be asking, so that we can find the right answers that we need. And where I used the military. Yes, so I think I totally agree with the concept of the military, but we will need to anyway have some form of alternative, not this, hundreds of thousands of people in the military, but some form of idea of a military, maybe learning from the Singaporeans to, as a defensive force. Maybe we need a navy, definitely, because we have a huge, wide ocean around. Maybe we need some kind of air defense. I'm no expert on this, but I do ask the same question. I do agree with him on that. Yeah, there were three very important enlightening questions that he raised. Thank you for that, Ranjan.
I think thank you very much. We more or less nearly 2 hours now, but I think we've done very good discussion today. Very thought-provoking. Just to kind of summarize, so we take it home and see how to. First of all, we talked about professionalism being politicized, giving problems. We talked about inclusivity and speaking up, which is very important. That is what we should promote most of our people to do. And we talked about regional governance as a new concept with promoting competition between regions, which is a good concept. But at the same time, it needs to be, I think, talked a lot more. I think which we will probably take up, if you're happy, Anura, later on at some point, because that's an important aspect to talk about. Public defender regionally is a very important area. I think that needs to be covered, which is a very good thing that we talked about. And we talked about national security and military, which is a big subject anyway. So I'm not, I think we should discuss that separately as well. So most important thing came from Basil saying, how do we walk there? How do we get there? That's the important point that we really need to focus at this year, because there's an election coming up. So I hope you will all join next week and see whether we can make any impact. That is what we are doing at the moment. So it's not directly leads, it will be a system change parameter, which is being run differently and in a different motive. So we will continue as people who are doing learning and education and discussing issues like this in an equitable manner. Yeah, great. Thank you very much, and have a good night or good morning or a good evening. Oh, thank you so much. Goodbye. Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.